Welcome to Pathways in Pediatrics, the official podcast of the European Academy of Pediatric Societies.
In this episode, we're going to revisit some highlights from the recent EAPS 2025 Congress in Lisbon.
Specifically, we're focusing on the allergy in the newborn session. It was incredibly well attended, and for good reason. The topics are just so central to everyday practice.
Absolutely. We're going to unpack the key insights from two leading French experts. First, Professor Patrick Tunian on cow's milk protein allergy, or CMPA.
And then Professor Emmanuel Mahe on atopic dermatitis. These are, as was said in the session, often the very first signs of sensitization in infants.
And they pose real challenges, for diagnosis, for management, and especially when it comes to prevention, where the data can be really surprising.
It certainly can. So let's jump right in with Professor Tunian's presentation on CMPA. He started with diagnosis, right?
Yes, specifically on food protein-induced allergic proctocolitis. The clinical picture he described is one you've probably seen: rectal bleeding in a newborn who is otherwise perfectly healthy.
And the first surprising point he made was about prevalence. It actually happens more often in breastfed infants than in formula-fed ones.
Exactly. Which feels a bit, counterintuitive.
It really does.
But here's the key clinical takeaway he stressed. For this specific presentation, no investigation is needed.
So no scopes, no complex tests.
Nothing. It's all about watching for resolution after you eliminate the protein.
But, and this seems to be his most emphatic point, that elimination has to be followed up.
Yes. You absolutely must perform an oral food challenge later. If you eliminate cow's milk protein for, say, 4 weeks and the bleeding stops, that is not the end of the story.
Because if you skip that challenge, you're likely overdiagnosing.
Massively. He cited a study that was just eye-opening. Of all the infants whose bloody stools resolved after their mothers eliminated dairy, only 1/3 actually had confirmed CMPA after the challenge.
So 2/3 of those babies would have been kept on an unnecessary elimination diet.
Precisely. And for the breastfeeding mothers themselves, he was quite pragmatic. He said they can often just continue consuming dairy.
Only eliminating it in very select symptomatic cases.
Right. And even then, the mother also needs a food challenge later on to reconfirm.
Okay, so that's diagnosis. What about treatment? He laid out a clear hierarchy for formulas.
He did. For mild to moderate cases, the first choice is either an extensively hydrolyzed formula, an EHF, or a rice formula.
And the amino acid formulas, the AA formulas.
Those are second choice.
Uh-huh.
That's the World Allergy Organization guideline. And he also mentioned avoiding soy formulas as a first-line option.
He also touched on something interesting about acquiring tolerance faster.
A randomized controlled trial. It looked at infants with IgE-mediated CMPA and found that stepping down from an AA formula to an EHS.
So moving from the most broken down formula to a slightly less broken down one.
Exactly. Especially one with the probiotic OGG added. That seemed to promote faster tolerance acquisition than just staying on the AA formula indefinitely.
Which really changes how we think about that step-down process. Okay, let's get to the most complex part. Prevention.
Right, and this is where things get really messy. First, the simple part: maternal diet. There's just insufficient evidence to recommend restricting diet during pregnancy or lactation.
In fact, his own work suggested the opposite, didn't it?
It did. That avoiding dairy during these periods might actually increase the risk of CMPA. So mothers should not be avoiding dairy to try and prevent allergies.
But then he introduced this concept of the dangerous bottle.
Yes. This is, that common practice in the maternity ward. A baby is meant to be exclusively breastfed, but to give the mother some rest, the baby gets a top-up bottle of standard whole cow's milk protein formula.
And the data on that is pretty scary.
It's stark. He showed studies where this practice increased the risk of CMPA 5-fold. And if you couple that with a C-section delivery, it was a 12-fold increase in risk.
Wow. Okay, so the clear recommendation there is if a supplement is absolutely necessary for a breastfed baby in the hospital.
Use an EHF or an AA formula, not a standard one.
But just as we're getting our heads around that, he presented completely conflicting data.
And this is the real head-scratcher. He showed another study where giving just 10 milliliters a day, that's literally 2 teaspoons of regular cow's milk formula, to exclusively breastfed infants.
Actually reduced the risk of CMPA.
By 8-fold, compared to exclusive breastfeeding alone.
How is that even possible? A big bottle is dangerous, but a tiny daily dose is protective.
It highlights just how much we don't understand about timing and volume. The conclusion from the French Pediatric Allergies Society, which he shared, is that, well, this early, small, controlled introduction of cow's milk protein may be preventive.
So we have this huge tension. The risk of the dangerous bottle versus the potential benefit of a protective teaspoon.
We desperately need more research to figure out where that line is.
Okay, let's pivot now to the second major topic, atopic dermatitis, and the insights from Professor Emmanuel Mahe.
Right. And he started with just some basic terminology. He really prefers the term atopic dermatitis over eczema
Why is that?
because eczema just suggests allergy, and AD, as he pointed out, isn't always allergic in origin.
And it's incredibly common, affecting up to 30% of infants. It's that first step in what we call the atopic march.
Exactly. The first domino that can lead to asthma, food allergies, rhinitis. And the cause is complex. It's not just one thing. There's genetics, like the filigran gene mutations.
Which affects the skin barrier.
Right. And then you have inflammation, the whole Th2 pathway, and even changes in the skin microbiota.
So with that skin barrier issue in mind, the big hope for years was primary prevention with emollients.
It was. I mean, we all remember those early studies from the UK and Japan suggesting that if you used emollients on high-risk newborns from birth, you could cut the incidence of AD by 50%.
But that hope seems to have faded.
Completely. Professor Mahe was very clear. The larger, more recent studies and meta-analyses show no impact.
No impact at all on incidence or severity.
None. At 1 or 2 years of age, it made no difference. So it's great for bonding, it's good for the skin, but it does not prevent atopic dermatitis.
And it wasn't just emollients that failed as a prevention strategy.
No, he ran through the whole list. Breastfeeding, maternal diet, different formula types, probiotics, vitamins. Systematic reviews have not confirmed any of them as effective primary prevention strategies.
So if we can't prevent it, management is everything. And he boiled it down to 3 keys.
Emollients, topical steroids, and education.
Emollients are still crucial for therapy, just not prevention.
Yes, and he stressed using them proactively, even when the skin is clear. But the biggest issue he tackled was corticophobia.
That fear of steroids that we see in parents all the time.
He addressed it head on. He said they are safe when used appropriately and are still the most effective treatment we have.
And his own practice was interesting. He argued for using more potent steroids for shorter periods.
Yes, even on the face or in infants. Get in, use a potent steroid until the skin is completely clear, and then get out. It's more effective and improves quality of life much faster than, fiddling with weak steroids for weeks on end.
And for the really severe cases.
Well, now we have new tools. Biologics like dupilumab, which is now approved for infants, and JCHA inhibitors. They target that Th2 inflammation pathway directly, but of course, they are very expensive.
So let's just synthesize a few final points that came up in the Q&A after the talks.
Right. On breastfeeding, Professor Tunanian reiterated that a mother drinking milk while breastfeeding does not prevent CMPA in her baby.
And critically, if a mother does need to eliminate dairy for a baby with confirmed symptomatic CMPA, you have to talk to her about calcium supplementation immediately.
It's incredibly difficult to get enough calcium otherwise.
So if we boil this whole session down for the clinicians listening, what are the 2 biggest takeaways?
Okay, number 1, don't overdiagnose cow's milk protein allergy. For that proctocolitis presentation, you absolutely must do the oral food challenge to confirm it.
We can't have 2/3 of infants on an unnecessary elimination diet. It's just not good practice.
And number 2, be incredibly vigilant about that dangerous bottle of whole cow's milk formula in the maternity ward for breastfed babies.
While at the same time, we have to acknowledge this conflicting, powerful data suggesting that a tiny daily exposure might actually be protective.
It's a challenge we all have to navigate.
This has been an incredibly useful synthesis of what was a fantastic session at EAPS 2025. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Pathways in Pediatrics.
And we hope you'll continue the conversation with us in person at the next EAPS Congress. It's going to be in Athens, Greece, from the 24th to the 27th of September, 2026.
We'll leave you with a final thought to mull over. If that small controlled exposure to cow's milk protein is protective, while the single dangerous bottle is so risky, what is the fundamental difference? Is it volume? Is it frequency? Or is it maybe the state of the infant's gut microbiome at that exact moment of introduction? That's the question we need to answer.